Here's a very interesting situation that came up on TikTok today. So let me show you this video and let me know what you think in the comments, because there might be some differing views. But let's watch this first.
Oh, CEX, you made a huge up. Now, I purchased this game from CEX for £15. So I happily made a pickups video and someone sent me a message in the comments. It basically said, how did you get a £65 game for 15 quid? I was a little confused at that comment, so I went and did some digging. The first thing I did was go straight on their website to have a look. I scrolled through all of the Scooby-Doo games on the website, and lo and behold, I found this. This is the game I bought. So I made the assumption that maybe they charged me for this one. Lucky enough, I did keep the receipt they gave me. The absolute morons charged me for Mission Impossible and not for Scooby-Doo. So now I can say with all honesty, I'm very happy with my latest pickup. So now I'm even happier to put you on the shelf. So this is how I got a £70 game for 15 quid.
So this situation might not be quite as straightforward as many people think, because on the face of it, she's bought a game and not realised that she's paid the incorrect amount for the game. She's actually paid £15 and she has a receipt for £15, but the receipt shows a different game title than the one she actually intended to buy and the one that she returned with. But in making the video, she said that she made it in response to other people commenting, how did you get this game for this amount? It's supposed to be £70. So she said, in her own words, she did some digging and then she found out that in fact she's got the game for £15 when it's supposed to be £70. Now, on the one hand, you might think, well, did she not realise that this was supposed to be £70 in the first place? Or maybe it's perfectly innocent, innocuous, and she just bought it for £15 and didn't realise that it should have been more than £15. Either way, and by the by, that's not really the point here. The real point here is that now that she knows that she's got a game that is worth 70, it was supposed to be sold for 70, and actually she's paid 15, she now knows that there's been a mistake made, particularly because the receipt has a different title on it. So what would you do in this situation? Would you go back to the store and say, I'm sorry, there's been a mistake made, you've undercharged me, and in fact you need to charge me the correct amount if I'm to keep the game? Or would you just keep it and think that it's the shop's problem, the shop's fault? Well, if you would think the latter, then respectfully, you're in the wrong, because that would be dishonest. Allow me to explain. You see, in an ordinary civil society, we expect people to live up to a certain standard. And there's a standard of honesty versus dishonesty that has changed somewhat over the years. It used to be defined in a case called gauche, but now it's defined more properly in a case called Ivy and Genting casinos. Law students, take note, you'll be familiar with it. This changed in 2017, which overturned some 25 years or so for the test of dishonesty. It used to be a two-part test, incorporating both what would an ordinary and honest, reasonable person think of the situation and what would the defendant think. Now, in the current test, we don't really care too much about what the defendant thinks, because we shouldn't really as a society be lowering our standards to that of what a defendant to a charge of dishonesty thinks of their dishonest or alleged dishonest behaviour. So now we just judge it on what would an ordinary, honest, reasonable person think. Would they think that it's dishonest? Well, in this situation, it's even catered for under the Theft Act, where if someone obtains property by some kind of mistake and there's an obligation to return it, then that can amount to dishonest appropriation. So that then warrants some explanation of what theft is. Theft has 5 elements to it. It's the dishonest appropriation of property belonging to another with the intention to permanently deprive the person of it. Now, the dishonest appropriation part might have some difficulty when the person didn't, you could say, dishonestly appropriate it when they first acquired it, as in this game here. But that's not necessarily the end of the matter, because now that she realises that she's got this game that is worth £70 and she only paid £15 for it, it would then objectively, in my view at least, it would objectively become dishonest because she's keeping it and has no intention to reimburse the shop for the difference in value. Now, as I said, there is a section of the Theft Act that does cover this, which is section 5, subsection 4, which says where a person gets property by another's mistake and is under an obligation to make restoration in whole or in part of the property or its proceeds or of the value thereof, then to the extent that the obligation in the property or proceeds shall be regarded as against him as belonging to the person entitled to the restoration, and an intention not to make a restoration shall be regarding accordingly as intention to deprive that person of the property or its proceeds. So in other words, if there's an obligation on a person to reimburse the other person of the value of goods that they now have, because they know that there's a distinction in the value because there's a mistake made by the other person, so they've got something by mistake, and there is an obligation to make a restoration of the value, the moral implications don't really come into it. There is an obligation in a civil society to make reparations and to reimburse the shop for the difference in value. So this is covered in the Theft Act, and I suggest would be covered by the new test for dishonesty, which is, would an ordinary reasonable person think that this is dishonest to keep a game that you know has been undersold to you? This is somewhat different to the situation where you go into a shop and an item is on a shelf marked up at a price, and then you take it to the counter and they accept it and you buy it at that price. Then the contract's been formed. But in the event that it's just gone through at the wrong price, let's say, for example, $199 or $199 instead of $1,099 or something like that, if that's gone through as a mistake and you know it's a mistake and it's just the mistake of the cashier and to the detriment of the shop, then that can amount to a dishonest appropriation either then or later, because you know that you've obtained it for much less than it's really worth. Which is different, as I say, from the invitation to treat, which is the technical term for a price on a shelf, your offer, which is you offering to buy it at that price, and then the acceptance and the consideration. It's different in that if a mistake has been made as to the fundamental underlying nature of the offer and the contract, i.e. it's just wrong, then it can amount to a dishonest appropriation, and this has been upheld in previous criminal cases. So what would you do in this situation? Because in this situation, this TikTok user made a video about it, which is also, as it happens, a form of confession, because a confession is any kind of statement which is wholly or partly adverse to the maker of the statement. And the reason that's the case is she's explaining that she now knows that it's been undersold and she's only paid £15 when it's worth £70. So the video in itself could be used as evidence as some form of confession. Because a confession doesn't need, as some people think it does, doesn't need to be made to a person in authority. And that is specifically set out in the Criminal Justice Act. So I thought that was an interesting situation, because some people do obtain something that is by mistake or been mistakenly sold at the wrong price. I would go back into the store and pay the correct price. But equally, I understand that many people wouldn't. My suggestion to you is that that would be potentially criminally wrong. So let me know in the comments what you think. This is not to prejudge anybody in the comment section. I'm just interested in what you think and what your views are on this situation. But I hope you found that interesting. Please do like the video and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.